Okay. Okay, I think we're recording. Hi, everyone. I'm Eniola. Thank you so much again for joining us tonight. I'm a user researcher and also the founder of UX Out Loud. And so we decided to do this, this joint research project all around research, and we're calling it What Makes a Successful UX Researcher? And this is really an exploratory research project in how UX researchers navigate career journeys, what has worked really, really well, what has not worked so well. We're rolling all of this up into recommendations and implications for what UX Out Loud can do better to serve our clients, which is you all, our audience, which is you all, and what gaps exist in the market and what the future of UX research looks like. And so we'll get into a lot of that tonight in the slides, and then we'll also have some time to have some discussion with you all. So thanks for joining. Awesome. So I said it before, if anyone's unfamiliar with the brand, I run UX Out Loud and started it about 4 years ago. So thank you to everyone for being part of this community over the past 4 years. And I'm really excited to have seen it grow. And I've done research kind of throughout my journey and building out what this brand and what this business was going to look like. I had no idea it would look like this 4 years ago, but it's really organically grown. And so the purpose here, when I was approached by Outset, and asked kind of what research was on my mind, I thought about, well, UX Out Loud is at its year 4. And we've done some really amazing things in this community. And what's still left to do? What are we missing? What could we do better? And so I wanted to do a research project around researchers in the space and what we can learn from people who were really, really successful as far as what were some of the catalysts that made a difference in your career progression. What were some of the barriers that you had to overcome to get to where you are as a user researcher now? And then I wanted to share it all. Right. And it was really exciting hearing about Outset and this AI moderation tool, because we all know as researchers, the past 2 years, the conversation has been nonstop around how AI is here and how it's going to change what our industry looks like. And so I wanted to get my hands dirty, right? And the team here was interested in getting their hands dirty and using an AI tool and discovering what it was like. And so we'll talk a lot about that too tonight. But excited to share this project with you all. It's been 2 months in the making, and it's been a lot of fun. So I'll kick it off. I'll kick it off to the team to introduce themselves. You all know me. I'm Eniola. I'm the founder of UX Out Loud. I'm also a UX researcher for the past 10 years. I'm currently at Meta, and I'll kick it to Meg.
Thanks, Eniola. Welcome, everyone. I'm Meg Savongsa, and my background is in public health. I have been a UX researcher for a year, but been in the research space for 3 years.
Hey everyone, I'm Liz Premer. My background is in enterprise software, and I've been in UX in the UX industry for about 5 years now.
Hi everyone, I'm Jasmine Brown. My background is in computer science, and I've been a researcher for about a year in e-commerce and edtech.
Hi everyone, my name's Hilda. My background is in learning design, and I currently do research on SaaS products. I've been in product for the past 3 years.
Incredible. This was a really incredible team, y'all. It was so fun to work with them. We met early in the morning, early in the mornings, and like spent hours kind of going over what we wanted to share out. And how to make these learnings into actionable recommendations for UX Out Loud, right? So you'll see us go from learnings to capturing the implications and the recommendations to opportunities for what may be coming next from UX Out Loud in the new year. So excited to share. So our agenda for tonight, we'll start off with an introduction of the project and provide some research context. So the background and goals that we went into the project with, the project setup and what that looked like on an AI tool, right? So looking at like our screener, discussion guide, things like that. And then we'll talk through our participant sample and characteristics. And then from there, we'll talk through some of the key insights that came out of this research. So one, like I mentioned before, the common barriers and catalysts that make up what UXR career strategy and career up-leveling has looked like for people. Two, really the call to action to provide spaces to build skills outside of work. And so when we think about projects and things that are relevant to our work within a company, that's one thing, and kind of building skills outside of that, looking like up-leveling, and how do I socialize my work, and how do I drive impact, or how do I increase my influence in an organization. We'll talk about this age-old dichotomy of whether a researcher should generalize and take on as many methods and as many styles of research as possible, or if you should niche down in an industry. And then we'll talk about preparing for the future of UXR, so what that looks like with AI on the scene. Okay. Lastly, we'll spend some time talking about our experience using AI, so what it was like using Outset, what we heard from people who didn't like it, who liked it a lot. And then we'll have time for discussion to hear from you all and what you think about some of the recommendations that came out, any learnings that you thought were interesting or surprising. So we'll have a fair bit of time at the end to hop into some really casual discussion. Okay. So for now, I will kick it off to Jasmine to take us through research context.
Thanks, Eniola. All right, so yeah, getting us started, what was like really our motivation for conducting this research? And that was to explore those gaps that existed in supporting UX career strategy. As we know, UX Out Loud's target audience is really those junior and senior researchers who are feeling stuck or looking to take the next step in their careers. So by conducting this research, where we're looking to aggregate knowledge and experience from dozens of professional researchers and figure out what actually works in this market. So understanding what barriers they face, what they were looking for in these moments to overcome those barriers, how they talk about their skills, and just the missing links to their success as researchers. So these learnings will really inform UX Out Loud's coaching methods, core offerings, and like how UX Out Loud is marketing to these potential researchers. So when we look at the research goals, we know that we want to inform that new product development for UX Out Loud, but the research questions that we're really trying to answer are about uncovering those barriers and catalysts to launching a career in research, understanding which skills and capabilities are most relevant to driving impact in your career, and then discovering where UXR is headed according to current professionals, like what is the future, what does the future hold for us? So let's get into the method. So as Eniola introduced, we talked about, we decided to use those AI moderated interviews via Outset AI. And we did this because we wanted to conduct discovery research to understand the problem space from many different perspectives. So we needed to do these in-depth interviews to really cast a wide net in terms of who we were talking to and the information we were getting from them. So this let us conduct qualitative directional research at a quantitative scale. So we were able to talk to a lot of different people. And then it also helped us mitigate these potential scheduling constraints. When you're working at a high volume, it can be really hard to find the time, but Outset is like a self-service research method. So it really let people do these interviews on their own time. Some of the challenges that we faced in using this method were primarily really polarizing views on AI moderation. Some people maybe weren't comfortable feeding the algorithm their information, or they felt like using an AI moderator was like taking the researcher away from the work. So people really didn't want to participate for various reasons around not liking AI. Another challenge we had was qualifying participants. We really did want to be inclusive, but we also needed to make sure we screened for people who had current experience in the market the way it is today. And then another thing we struggled with was participant drop-off. When you're doing an in-depth interview with a person, 30 or 40 minutes, you have some good back and forth. But in this case, if you're just talking to a screen, like to the AI, it can be a little draining. So we did have some challenges with participant drop-off as well. In actually setting up the project, when we were screening for participants, the main criteria that we were looking at were folks with at least 1 year experience as a researcher. This was so that we knew they had gone through the like job hunting process, as well as had time in the industry to like hit some of those barriers and overcome them and learn and grow in their career thus far. We also wanted a mix of junior, mid, senior, and like lead or principal level researchers. So we could really get a wide breadth of experience, and the different kinds of things that people have struggled with throughout their careers is going to vary based on that experience level. So we really wanted an even mix of those. We also wanted people who were experienced job hunting as UXRs in a more recent time. UX, as we know, has changed a lot over the years. So we wanted people who had done something pretty recently in the job hunt market. And then lastly, we were open to a good mix of industries. Research looks a little different everywhere, so we wanted to be able to get the perspective from people, not just in big tech, but kind of all across the board. So when participants were sent the link to join the interview, they would be taken directly to the screener. And if they passed the screener, they were taken directly into the interview. So they could complete the interview totally on their own time. This was also really nice because we could use the screener to determine their seniority and then dynamically adjust the interview questions accordingly. So we could really target those different levels. So getting into how the discussion guide is actually set up, in Outset AI, we developed the screener survey. With the screener all set up, it's kind of pretty typical looking. We move into the actual interview questions. So the way we did this was you write the interview questions in a very traditional style, making sure to, make sure your questions are open-ended and unbiased, and then do a slight adjustment to the questions to include prompts to the AI to probe or direct the conversation or add additional information. So an example here, only ask this question if they mention transitioning into UX research from another field. Make sure to call out what the previous career in the question was. So this is like a guide to the AI to say, when you are posing this question, make sure to consider these things before you pose it. So in this case, the question is, what, if anything, was transferable between your previous role and your first UX role? That's the question from the discussion guide, but when the AI presents it, it might come out as, what, if anything, was transferable between your previous role in my case, computer science, and your first UX role. So it'll add the context that's relevant to the participant. And then once the participants have gone through, they've answered the screener questions, and they have done the interview itself, we have a data collection platform as well in Outset. So all of the high-level participant data gets displayed like this, in basically kind of an Excel sheet. You can think of it that way. And then each row represents a participant. So all of their responses are transcribed, and you can read through those responses, or you can click in and see the video clip so you can really see more about their tone and how they're saying things and their body language when they speak through. Each participant has an AI generated summary about what their interview was like. And then for all the participants, you also get AI generated insights. And then you can even drill down and ask the AI questions about the interview data that you collected. So a really unique way to gather insights at a large scale. So I'll be passing it on to Mech to talk about our participant sample.
Thanks, Jasmine. All right, so I'll dive into who we talked to. So we talked to 33 participants with varying degrees of education and experience levels. For education, the highest number was bachelor's. And then we talked to from junior to principal/managerial levels. We really wanted to make sure that we talked to people who were transitioning into the field, so they encountered barriers and the barriers and catalysts to transitioning. So that'll be helpful for us to learn from, and for those who have been in the space for a while, and how they navigated those transitions. So I'll highlight some characteristics and differentiators. I think it's no surprise to us that UX research draws from multidisciplinary backgrounds. So we wanted to highlight some insights from the population that we chatted with. 3 aspects we wanted to focus on was, how did education play a foundational role in transitioning to UX research? Because there's been courses that people took that have been foundational to learning skills that help them in UX research. And then second, we want to understand, how did people land upon UX research? And then third, the motivations, what drives them to this field. All right, so the role of education. So we did talk to people. And we noticed that those with master's and PhD levels had exposure to research experience that helped them in the transition a lot successfully. So research experience, particularly certain courses in research methods, planning research, and data analysis. And we also learned that those with social sciences background also transition a bit more successfully across all education levels. So those in anthropology, sociology, psychology. And then we learned how did people find UX research. So there was a catalyst in how people found UX research, particularly in keeping their networks warm. So what we mean by that is they shared their interest in specific roles with employees, either former or existing colleagues, and they were able to be pivotal in helping people identify job opportunities quickly and carved out an intentional path of a career growth for them. So they leveraged existing roles in their companies to be able to conduct research projects and learn about those opportunities quickly. To sum it up, they were pretty proactive in their career to be able to identify what they wanted and was able to convey that to people who could help them get to that next step. And then why UX research, which may resonate with some of us, but particularly people were interested in understanding human behavior and conducting research to solve problems and taking those aspects and being able to design to shape products and experiences based on understanding people. And then particularly for those who were transitioning from academia, it was slower impact for them in academia, and then just the lack of variety in topics as well as pay. All right, so the key insights, which we're very eager to know more about. So at a high level, some insights that we'll explore further. These are just aimed at addressing some career support services to help with those who are transitioning or may feel stuck in their career. One being researchers needing training support, targeting common barriers. Two, researchers needing places to develop skills outside of work and learning how to navigate team structures and how that can influence their experiences in navigating those challenges. And then three, just the emphasis of building a niche and how that can help you stand out in a very competitive market. And for the future of AI and how to prepare for that in UX research. And then I will pass it on to Jasmine to share about the barriers and catalysts.
Thanks, Mick. So yeah, one of our biggest insights was that researchers need training and support to target some common barriers. So we'll talk about what those barriers were and what they really look like. So the couple of the common barriers we saw were first, lack of available positions. I'm sure a lot of us have felt or heard this, but researchers at all levels brought up the lack of available positions and just a greater competition in the current market with so many very, very talented folks being laid off. So that poses a pretty particular challenge. And also, we noticed that a lot of researchers found themselves in the research role from an adjacent position, whether it was design or product management. They kind of eked over from somewhere else. So when you're thinking about your career and what you can do, really try to find opportunities to do user-centered projects in your roles and courses before you transition. I think a great example is us getting to do this work with Eniola, just to be able to keep our skills sharp, really build the skills that we do have, and be able to kind of step into a role as it comes up. So really trying to make sure you stay relevant in research, even if you're not actually working in that position. Another common barrier that we saw was framing past experiences. Researchers come from so many different interdisciplinary backgrounds, but because of that, they may lack the actual language and jargon to talk about UXR appropriately on their resume or their portfolio, even if they have the transferable skills. So if that's this case that you find yourself in, really immerse yourself in learning the language and the jargon and the methodologies but also try to find researchers who have a similar background as you and see how they describe their experience. Make time with them, read through their LinkedIn, and see how you can translate your experience that's the same into the right language in a way that they might do. Another couple of common barriers we saw were really a struggle to develop business acumen. This is something, again, researchers at all levels struggled with, where you need to learn the language of your stakeholders. You need to not only be able to have access to impact data, but be able to contextualize it for the group that you're working with. And just knowing how to work best with your stakeholders, what resonates with them, what their priorities are, and how you can tie that into your research practice. We also saw that this was particularly difficult for candidates who came from academic backgrounds because the way impact is driven in an organization is pretty different than the way it's driven in academia. So something to be on the lookout for in the future is a new course from UX Out Loud about how to develop business acumen and use that in your research practice going forward. And then the last most common barrier we saw was really a struggle to build strong networks. We all know that networking is a really critical catalyst for success among researchers, but it's pretty difficult today to even still do that networking. Potential contacts can be pretty overwhelmed with outreach. They might be unresponsive, especially some more like senior level folks. People may struggle to build genuine connections, and then you could have people reaching out to you or you're reaching out to folks in a way that's very transactional. So being intentional about building these genuine relationships. On the flip side of the common barriers, there were those common catalysts. And the biggest one was that proactive networking. There's a few different things to consider when you're looking at networking and how that can look for you and how to make it work effectively. So the first things to consider are building your networks both internally and externally to your organization because they offer different types of benefits. When you're building your network internally, you're really thinking about sponsorship. You want to build your network with not just researchers, but other cross-discipline roles, because these are the people who will help you find opportunities to provide impact in your organization. They'll also be the folks who can vouch for your work and your skill set as a researcher. So you really want these people on your team and to have actually experience working with them. The other thing you need to do is build your external network. So these are going to be great people for getting feedback on your application materials, discovering external job opportunities, or just learning about other industries that you're interested in. So these are people are more about like broadening your research set, whereas the internal is more about like honing in on what you can do. The other thing to consider when you're doing that proactive networking is what strategies are effective. I think we've all sent that like cold message on LinkedIn, like, hey, I don't know you kind of thing, but there's some particular things that you can do to make that kind of thing more effective. So when you are reaching out to someone, reach out to someone if you're impressed with their work or their background. If you've seen someone give a presentation or something like that, reach out to them and say you want to chat. Once you finally do get that time to chat with someone, make sure to bring a specific set of questions instead of asking for general advice. This helps guide the conversation and makes everyone feel like their time is being valued appropriately. Again, just emphasizing to build that relationship with your coworkers who can act as sponsors and providing you those opportunities that can really make or break your ability to transition internally. So make sure to network with those people as well. And then the last thing to be really considerate of is to respect people's boundaries and time. Vary who you ask for advice, how often you ask for it, and that sort of thing, so you aren't overwhelming one or two people. So some implications of this, particularly for UX Out Loud, are to provide that specific training and support materials to target these common barriers and to really have these considerations in mind as other course offerings are going forward. And then quick overview for everyone for those practical tips for you are to find opportunities to do that research work in your current role or courses, immersing yourself in learning the language, finding researchers with similar backgrounds to learn how to talk about your transferable skills. And then again, when you're doing that networking, reaching out when you're impressed, bringing a specific set of questions, building relationships with current coworkers, and then respecting people's boundaries and time. And so I'll hand it off to Mek to talk about our next instance.
So really quickly before you take it, Mek, I just want to pose this question to you all. So when we were doing this project and doing data analysis and pulling out some of the key learnings, one of the clearest ones was that We know that doing good research isn't good enough anymore in this market. As researchers, we also have to have a really strong business acumen and connect our research insights to the business objectives and to opportunities to get us closer to what those objectives are. And so if folks are familiar with the work that we've done this past summer, we partnered with User Interviews to do a Research 101 for non-researchers course. So that was aimed at all product people, all people who interact with user-facing products, and people who do research in general, regardless of what their role is, to really share some basic strategies and an introduction into human-centered design and how we develop insights and how we socialize these insights. And so coming out of this research, we decided that there was more work to do, right? And more instruction to give. And so we're launching a Business 101 course for researchers. And so you'll see more information on that later in this month. And it's very early in January, so keep a lookout for that on LinkedIn or join the email list. Super, super excited. It'll be a two-part course. It'll be completely free, just like Research 101 was. And so excited to put that together and share that with you all soon. Okay, now I'll pass it to Meg.
Thank you. All right, and so this next insight that I'll explore with you all is just researchers needing spaces to develop skills outside of work and learning the strategies to navigate specific team structures, because that can present its own challenges of how and that can impact your career growth. So some external factors that I'll touch upon, one being just how your team is structured, which can present challenges and certain experiences that impact your career growth. So one being research teams of one may not have someone to bounce ideas off of, to give and receive feedback. So in some ways they can feel stuck. And so cultivating some spaces where they are able to present their research plan and getting feedback on that. There's also challenges of those who may serve in consultancy capacities. And so they may feel as if they may not have enough influence because they're there for a short time, but also not having the time to build rapport with stakeholders to really be able to influence decision making. And so those are some challenges that people have navigated. And so and then also the ability to drive impact depends on how the product teams interact with UX research as a whole. So how do they value UX research, and how does that come into play in terms of in terms of really emphasizing it and then being able to make decisions, and also socializing your findings and making that creating a clear roadmap of how to present those findings. And so some tips that hopefully are of application to you all is collective research crits. So really having a space for people to serve as thought partners when you have maybe a research plan that you want to go over with someone, some questions that you're not sure about. So really having that space to really get feedback. Podcast episodes, so really that's a creative outlet as well, that can be hopefully accessible to a lot of people. And then virtual spaces to share work challenges in a safe space, and maybe in hearing from people who have navigated similar experiences. And then another factor that we wanted to touch upon is researchers needing third spaces outside of work, especially in terms of building research strategy. And so some challenges that were presented to us were those who, there's challenges in the status quo in product organizations. So some people may be so used to doing things a certain way that how do you get your team to try new things, essentially, as well as building influence amongst cross-functional stakeholders. So immersing yourself in some business acumen, business sense around how to do that. And then career growth and how to socialize your impact. So really articulating what you want out of your career and how to make sure that your findings are not just sitting in a repository of some sort, maybe, and having a roadmap of, okay, now here are the findings, how are we going to act upon them, and really trying to drive that conversation forward with the people who can make those decisions. And then also how to showcase case studies discreetly to honor company NDAs. We hear a lot about how do you communicate impact, but sometimes people are balancing the NDA and limitations. And so hearing from people who have navigated the transition and have hearing from them doing live portfolio feedback, whether it's through live portfolio feedback from those who have done something similar in order to honor other businesses, other organizations. Also following researchers online as they occasionally share research resources. And what I mean by research resources are planning research or how to develop research questions and things like that. Then immersing yourself in materials that influence business decisions. So really harnessing your business acumen. Okay, and some implications. So UX Out Loud is positioned to be a safe place, third place for UX researchers to up-level and get creative with projects and share their experiences with those who may be navigating similar challenges. And so some application tips for us are some collective research critiques for those who need thought partnership in conducting and implementing research, podcast episodes, live portfolio reviews with feedback from those in similar experiences dealing with NDA limitations, following those in academia, perhaps those who may have served as professors as they share resources on conducting research, and then immersing yourself in business strategy resources. So I'm going to pass it over to Eniola as she has a question for you all in terms of research crits. Yeah.
So thank you, Meg. I'm just curious in the chat how when we heard the finding of researchers want third spaces, like it's not enough to just have kind of general career advice outside of work and then have very project specific, team specific advice within their companies. We really heard the ask for this third space of, okay, where do I talk about things that, I can't really talk to my manager about because I'm thinking about how to diversify and grow my career. And it's not project-based, or things like putting out which projects to put into my portfolio. Where do I talk about those things, or where do I talk about how to increase my influence and get specific into questions around what I'm dealing with at work. And so we talked about this idea of creating a monthly or however so often third space like Research Crit. So I'm curious if anyone's ever thought of that. Does that sound helpful? Does something else sound helpful? Or what would you be interested in participating in, like a UX Out Loud NDA protected Research Crit, where you could come in and get thought partnership. You could get feedback on your research materials or your research, which methods you're thinking about, and discuss with other researchers like yourself what they're doing that's helpful, and give feedback. So just curious, drop it in the chat if that's something that would be interesting to you to use. Awesome. Okay, so I'm hearing from folks that they'd be down, would be best to share and get feedback. Okay, folks would find it interesting. Amazing. Okay, well, thanks for all the people who are hopping in the chat. Yeah, so I think this is something that it might make sense to try out. So keep a lookout in the new year. Awesome. Would love to see the community come together as well. Incredible. We've also heard a lot of, I've heard a lot of feedback over the years, and we heard a lot of feedback in this research project around this question around the NDA, right? Everybody's biggest question around portfolios is, how do I share this great research I did when I have an NDA and it's protected, this information is protected? And the thing that I always say to that question is, one, everyone has an NDA. Every single company in their standard contract has an NDA, right? And still we have to present our work. And so the thing that I'll say there is, one, the NDA protects like proprietary information from being shared in a public space. So when you're creating your portfolio, I advise everyone to have a slide deck version of it. When you're sharing case studies in an interview, that's not a public space. You're not publishing it. You're not making money from it. And so you're not violating that NDA. The other thing I'll say is that the things that are protected in that NDA are things that hiring managers don't care about. Right. So I don't need the specific names of the products or the version numbers or the specific amounts of users you were working with or the exact dollar amount that somebody spent on a project. What I want to know is your research strategy. I want to know how you got to your method design and why. I want to know what your sample looked like and why it looked like that. I want to know about your outcome because those are the things that you can take and replicate at my organization if I'm looking to hire you. Okay. All right. I'll get off my soapbox. Thank you. I will kick it to Jasmine. Mech. Amazing.
Jasmine.
All
right, awesome. So the next insight we'll talk about is how researchers are really undervaluing the need to build a niche in their professional brand. So why is it important to build a niche in the first place? We've seen in the past that UXR was really finding its place. And because of this, it was really open to a lot more different diverse backgrounds. And that's not to say that it's closed off, but now as UXR's prevalence has grown just across numerous industries, we're really seeing like processes, specific needs, research structures, and foundational knowledge varies a good bit based on the industry. So with the current market saturation, when hiring managers are looking for someone, they're requesting this industry specific background so they can more easily onboard folks with minimal resources. So for you as a job seeker and for what we saw in our participant pool, people are really casting this like wide net and trying to generalize their skill set to maximize their job prospects. But this was actually a hindrance because hiring managers are seeking this specialized skill set. So as you're out there and you're job hunting and you're putting your application materials together, make sure that you are targeting projects and experiences within a specialization and showcasing those kinds of things in your portfolio. Seek mentorship from people who are working in a specific niche so you can learn more, you can learn the language that they use and how to talk about that experience. And then stay away from really generic descriptions of UXR on your resume and portfolio. Instead, try to highlight things that make you different and show that specialization. So think about using industry-specific terminology, talking about workflows that exist in that industry. If you have any, if you're going into work with regulatory considerations, show that you have that awareness. And then your like unique needs and behaviors of users within that sector, if you have any of that background, showcase those kinds of things as well. Because UXR skills are transferable, but industry-specific expertise is going to be really essential for your success in the market today. So for UX Out Loud, we really want to help guide researchers in building a niche-specific professional brand through helping them stand out in the current market. And just remember for you all to target those projects and experiences in your portfolio and other application materials, seeking that mentorship from people in that specialization, and then staying away from those generic descriptions. I think Eniola wanted to chat with y'all about this as well.
Oh, Eniola always wants to chat. Okay, so I just wanted to call out this opportunity here because again, like there are different schools of thought around whether I should be a generalist and like cast as wide a net as possible to get a UX research job, or should I niche down? And this came up a lot in the research, and it's something that I think about a lot as a career coach. And sometimes when I look at resumes for researchers, I see things like I'm empathetic, I'm collaborative, and I specialize in turning research insights into actionable next steps for businesses. And those things like that, like those generic kind of bullet points that are kind of definitions of what UX researchers do and can be said about every researcher, aren't going to catch hiring managers' attention. And it comes across as very high level, very general. Instead, you want to communicate the specific like wins and achievements and like specialties that you have within the industry. And also, like if you come from a different background, great, that's not a bad thing. Tell me what you bring from that background, what skills, what experience, what familiarity you bring from that background into research. So I know who you are as a researcher, not just that you can run interviews and can write a survey and have done that in the past, right? Okay. I'll kick it to Hilda.
Thank you, Aniela. Thank you, Jasmine. So the final insight we are getting into is the future of UX research as seen by the researchers in this study. And as you've heard already, a lot of it was about business strategy and how the future is going to be very business strategy first in who they hire, as well as those who know how to navigate AI as a tool that they use in their research. So we are going to begin with the business strategy side. As like a lot of us have heard about conversations about democratizing research and how a lot of product managers are also learning to do research, and designers. And so it seems very clear that they want people who not only know how to do research, but are very, very close to business. And so having great cross collaboration tools and like abilities with other cross-functional researchers or cross-functional team members, and being able to use what you're learning to be better at the business and to put your insights as close to business as possible is going to be key in helping researchers progress in their careers today. I'm going to move on to AI as another key thing that people say is going to be a big part of the future of research. As a lot of people talked about how they feel like AI is going to be a big part of the future, but they don't know how. And there are so many tools out there, and there's so many that's being said about how AI is going to take our jobs, but it's becoming very clear that our jobs are going to be taken by people who understand how to use AI to do their jobs better. And so the tip that we have here is that we should try to explore AI tools and see, like what can AI do well? And then what are some uniquely human skills that we can develop in order to still stand out? As you've seen in this quote, someone was like, I know AI is going to be something, but I really don't know how. And a lot of us are in that place. So we have some recommendations that we're going to get into in the future. Can we go? Yeah. So I'm going to get into how we apply to AI. So how we applied AI to this research, as you've heard about some of that, and then share about what we learned and our experiences with it. During recruitment, some people participated because they are really curious about AI as a moderation tool, but that same tool was like some people were like, I don't want to be a part of this. I don't want my PI anywhere. I don't want my insights in some machine. And so it's still very much, there's so much skepticism still, and then people are also curious about it. And then when we got into the interviewing bit, people actually felt that talking to a machine was easier because they didn't feel judged and they didn't feel like they're going to be interrupted. So they could say their piece and know that somebody's not judging them. So that was interesting to see. At the same time, a lot of people felt that it could get repetitive, as everybody who's done research here knows that sometimes you ask a question and then somebody responds to something else organically that was going to come up on your discussion guide. A human being knows to now, skip that question when it shows up, but that wasn't the case with AI. So people were like, oh, I answered that earlier, and then it's being asked a third time. So that was interesting to see. And also another interesting thing we saw is that sometimes people would say something, a response to a question that doesn't necessarily answer that question. If it's a person asking these questions, they would notice that and then be like, oh, let me rephrase this question. Let me ask it a different way. AI couldn't necessarily pick that out. So some questions were not answered, even if responses were given. And then people shared about how they thought like 40 minutes was too long for them to be talking at nobody but a machine. And they felt like if it was a bit shorter, 20, 30 minutes max, people were saying that that's a good, a sweet spot for AI or just like machine-enabled interviews. And as you've seen, because we were able to use AI, we were able to run a lot more interviews. So basically doing qualitative research at a quantitative scale, which was really cool to see. But the question we have now is that necessary? I think getting into this research, we're curious about the fact that just because we can do 5 times more interviews, should we be doing that? And that was interesting to see in this study, because so the way that we did this analysis, a lot of us, we were able to take 7, take 5, take 8. And when I went back to look at all of the insights that we found, I found that if you picked any random set of 5 to 7, you found the same things. So it was interesting to see, because it's I feel like there are questions that are going to be questions that if you recruit more, you're going to actually learn more. And then questions where genuinely 5 to 7 people is enough, as we've been doing it. So we are going to see when we get to the recommendations about that. I'm curious to see if people see anything here that is oh, that surprises me. That's familiar to what I would have expected to happen. Here are some quotes from participants about how they felt about using AI. Yeah, I'm curious to see, does any of this feel oh, that doesn't surprise me? I would love to hear people's thoughts. Feel free to unmute, feel free to share in the chat.
If it's okay, I can share some thoughts.
Of course, please. Yes.
Yeah, Robert, what do you say in response to all this?
I'm in the hot seat. First and foremost, this research is so awesome, and the team at Outset, we're just so lucky and appreciative to be a part of it and to help bring these insights to life in the coming future. But yeah, I think it's very interesting. It's interesting that there's a lot of researchers that are still skeptical of the technology, yet there's so many other researchers, and the trend is that, hey, this technology is the future. And so I do think there's a bit of it just shows the polarizing nature of this technology. And I think the key is getting the technology into more researchers' hands. I think, as you all can probably attest, it's not as scary as it might seem as we're talking about it. It's actually just another tool in a toolkit. I do want to clarify a couple of things. This comes up on a lot of sales calls. Outset is primarily used with enterprises. So we work with companies like Intuit and Bain and Uber, and so more enterprise-focused companies doing a ton of research. And data privacy is definitely a concern amongst enterprises. So want to kind of throw that out there, that Outset does not train any models on data inputted into the platform or collected via the interviews. So I think it's an important thing to keep in mind as you all are researchers in this field. You definitely want to be conscious, because that can be the same for all AI tools. But definitely for Outset, we're very mindful of that, and our enterprise focused in that regard. But yeah, in terms of the last thing that I'll touch on is some of the quirks about the AI is, maybe it asks a question or doesn't do a good job at understanding that, hey, this person didn't fully answer this question. More often than not, the AI is really good at this, but it can slip up. But the beautiful thing about this technology is that that's going to only get better. This is literally the ground floor. And as the models improve, as these models become more intelligent, so will its ability to conduct these interviews in a more smarter and efficient way. So just wanted to highlight some of those things. And thank you again for doing this research. It's super interesting. I wish they could have done this. You all could have done this for sales, because I'm trying to figure out what to do myself. But yeah, I'll pass it back over to the UX Out Loud team.
Thanks, Robert. So interesting. Okay, so I'm curious to hear from folks who are in the room. What are your thoughts around this specific application of AI? How would you feel responding to an interview that was being moderated by an AI tool? I'm curious if it's as polarizing amongst this group of researchers, or if it changes based on levels, right? Because we talked to leaders and managers, we talked to junior researchers, mid-level, I almost said medium, mid-level researchers and senior researchers. So I'm curious how the trend changes as you go. Anyone got thoughts? Kat said research project number 2 with Outset.
Can I add something?
Yes, please.
I think I found it interesting how people were saying like they were more relaxed, but it stood out to me because I feel like sometimes people are scared to talk to computers and they get like nervous because like, oh, okay, what am I supposed to do here? But then again, on the other side, I'm like not really that surprised because I feel like sometimes when it comes to interviews, people don't like to do eye-to-eye contact sometimes because they feel like they're being judged on like their gestures and everything. So that was interesting. But then I also feel like paying attention to gestures and things of that sort also plays a big role when it comes to interviewing too. So how do we get to the point where AI can kind of notice those things as well? Or do we even want that to happen? Or is that where the recordings come into play and then we as researchers kind of go in and identify that part? And that's how we kind of keep it humanized in the sense of that. So that's something that just kind of came into my mind.
Yeah, thanks for joining, Samartha, and thanks for sharing that.
Can I touch on that really quickly?
Go for it.
Okay, so that I also had before joining Outset, I had the same kind of question, like, how is this experience going to be talking to an AI? And so Weight Watchers is one of our flagship customers, and similar to the feedback that the team had gotten as far as, oh, I feel like I can, be more comfortable or let my guard down with the AI. That's like one of the main reasons that they've continued to work with us over the last couple of years. The metaphor that I've heard from customers is like, it's like the confessional box, or like when you're, if you ever watch, reality TV, when someone goes into the booth and they're talking to the camera and they're like, that's kind of the experience people feel, or at least that's what we've heard. And then, the truth is though, is that if you're having a conversation with a human, you might have that conversation for free if the vibes are right and there, because there's that energy. And so people are never going to probably have conversations with an AI for free. So I think in a world where AI is moderating these conversations, what becomes even more important is the incentive. And, more like 99% of our customers are usually providing some sort of incentive. And so that also plays a part in people's willingness to participate in such a method.
This is really interesting because both of you touched on like people's comfort levels and like who they're talking to and not feeling judged. And one of my first projects at Meta, I was doing a channel research project on how people chose how do they contacted businesses. And so as I was thinking about myself, I read this quote from someone that was like, oh, I email or I text, or if I don't have to get on the phone with someone, I'm just not going to, right? And that's 100% 180 of how I approach things. Cause I'm like, if I can get a problem solved or a question answered, I'm a call. And if I can get this done in 30 seconds, but I'm thinking about my personality. I'm thinking about my extroverted self who likes to talk to people and would rather kind of get things done and addressed and doesn't like waiting for answers. And so we're in this, it's a reminder as researchers that we need to like use tools and design experiences, not for ourselves, right? But for end users. And so when I'm thinking about how I would want to do a research or do an interview, I mean, I did an interview with Outset and it was great. But when I think about how I want to engage with an interviewer, right? I'm fine doing in person. I'm fine doing AI. It probably depends on the subject matter. But when I think about our users, there might be more polarized, viewpoints on how they want to engage, if they're going to engage at all. And so when I think about UX researchers in general, a lot of us are extroverted, or a lot of us don't feel like nervous to like talk to people. Like it's what we do. We work with people all day. And so it's just interesting to think about, okay, how do researchers feel about this AI tool? And then how might some of the users in the world in the grander scheme of things feel about this tool in our toolbox?
I definitely think that the subject matter is is very important. Like the example Robert gave of Weight Watchers. I currently work in video game payments, and one of the first questions I always have to ask is, how much do you pay for video game merchandise in a month? And people get really uncomfortable answering that because like, oh my God, you're going to judge me. And I think because of that, I spend a lot of time thinking about the order of my questions in a way that's going to create comfort first. And I'm wondering if that's going to become less of an issue with AI, where people are like, yeah, $300 a month, and they know they're not going to be judged. It's interesting because when I first began, I didn't even play video games, so I didn't even know what they meant. People were like, can I actually tell you? Please don't judge. And I'm like, okay. So I think it would be easier for them to do this kind of research where they know for sure that no one's watching at all. So it's interesting to say that subject matter is definitely going to impact what projects are better or maybe not.
Yeah.
I
think one thing to add, though, also is that it goes the other way, right? Because I've had conversations and research sessions where people are telling me about their relationships, their kids, like what they're worried about, their businesses, and like all over the board, right? And so sometimes some of the good insights come from like just like verging off of the discussion guide and just like being like, okay, well, let's talk about that. Like you said something really interesting. Let's go there. And one of the things that I was skeptical about going into this project was AI can't probe like I probe. Almost nobody can probe like I probe, right? That's my specialty. That's the beautiful thing of being a UX researcher. So how is Outset gonna probe? That's one of the things that I was skeptical about. And when I was doing my own interview, I was like, oh snap, you're asking me questions that I know were not on the discussion guide. It was really interesting. So awesome. Thanks for chiming in, y'all.
Thank you, guys. On the next slide, we'll share some of the implications that came out of the discussion we just had. So for Outset, we were thinking that identifying the use cases, and it sounds like Robert and the team are on the right track for this, identifying specific use cases for which, like types of questions, segments, subject matter for which this kind of AI moderated research would be more suited, would help with like better product positioning. And for UX Out Loud, as we have seen in past slides, a lot of researchers are a bit, like on the edge of their seats, being like, how are we going to use AI in this space? UX Out Loud partnering with the tools that they work with to see if we can bring them closer to the people and have researchers explore these tools in a safe space and see how they can integrate them into their workflows. So tips for researchers in this space, whether by yourself or by joining some of these groups that we're going to begin at UX Out Loud, trying out the different AI tools and understanding them better and seeing what are they good at, what can they do, such that you can drill down on getting those uniquely human skills while also using AI to make your job easier will make us better researchers. And in general, focus on doing research that matters to your stakeholders, especially in a future where business acumen is really, really important. In addition to thinking about user needs, being able to always connect that to what keeps your POs up at night, what is the most important thing for the company right now, is always going to be helpful.
Mm-hmm. So to that end, sorry, Hilda.
No.
If we can go back to the last slide. I'm just curious to pose it to the audience. Is like guidance and kind of experimenting and playing around with AI tools and research, is that interesting? Is that intriguing to folks? I find a lot of people talk about how AI is here in UXR, but like don't necessarily know what it'll look like yet because they haven't gotten their hands into what these AI tools look like and what they can do and testing them out. And so we've thought about, okay, well, what does it look like to provide this opportunity for folks and like guided spaces to play around with AI and do real research projects. And so we did this in this apprenticeship, this group of folks, and there was a lot of interest in kind of using Outset and participating in this project. And so I think it's something that we should do again and bring in as many tools as possible. And so curious if that would be helpful, intriguing, or what folks think about that. Anyone in the room would find that helpful? Okay. Awesome. Getting some nods in the chat.
Mhm.
Cool. We'll keep a lookout for the next project.
Eniola, I feel like it'll be helpful, but it'd also be like a great way just to also discuss with each other like pros and cons or just different considerations, because I think it's one thing for us to like try a tool, but like
Yeah.
you might have your own personal bias, but then someone else sees something different. Just like we did now with this discussion about like how AI could be polarizing and like what potential topics may be better suited with at the current time. So yeah, I think it'll be helpful.
Thanks for calling that out, Stacey. It really always comes down to like, we're UX researchers and we love community. We love to talk about things and share thoughts and thought partner and hear what other people are thinking. So absolutely. Thanks for the reminder. Cool. I'll kick it back to Hilda.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good point, Stacey. And that's why we thought it would be helpful for us to be honest with you all about, we learned all these insights, and also here was the experience of people who use this new tool that none of us has used before. So I'm going to move on to summarize what we learned from this research. As Meg and Jasmine and Eniola have talked about earlier, one of the key things was that UX researchers need support with like the key barriers that we learned about today, such as framing past experiences, developing business acumen, and also how do you network in a way that actually works. And then the second one was UX researchers want community, like we have all agreed on. They want community, they want third spaces where they can develop skills together and like learn from each other. And this is, even if it's like developing business acumen, learning about what UX research looks from the different industries and like beyond big tech, basically. And then support with like building a niche. What could that look like? What niches exist? Are you in payments? Are you in like healthcare? What does that look like? Or are you like a mixed methods researcher? So providing space for us to do that together is another thing that seemed like it's really important to researchers who were in this study. And then the future of UX research was, there's a lot of talk about business acumen and how that's going to still be really important, as well as the role that AI is going to play that's still very much information. Yeah, so these are the key insights we learned. And I'm also going to summarize the implications of this research. So for Outset, like we said, identifying use cases that work best with AI as it continues to like learn more, but also exploring, I think that will come with just like, learning new information, but like exploring ways to make it easier for people to use AI as a moderation tool without repetition, or like actually making sure that questions are being answered. And then for UX Out Loud, we saw a lot of opportunities for training and like support on like the common barriers that we've discussed, and also third spaces for all kinds of things that researchers would love to talk about, including building niches, including how do you work on portfolios and how do you develop a niche, and also experimenting with AI tools as we keep learning about them, with both Outset AI and other tools that are out there. And then we have a lot of practical tips for researchers on this call, including finding opportunities to do user-centered research, especially if you've been laid off or if you are still in the job search. Trying to find ways of developing skills outside of the traditional job market, as it's quite difficult right now. And then, collective research crits and portfolio reviews, and getting into, reviewing research tools that we are curious about together. And then if you're networking, trying to be very, very clear on your goals before you reach out to someone, and then reaching out to people that you kind of know in your, places that you've been employed before, or people, like when you reach out to new people on LinkedIn, finding ways to make sure that you're not always just like asking, how can you make it a relationship where you actually also offer some kind of value, and how do you keep people updated even when you're not asking anything, such that when the time comes for you to need something, it doesn't feel like, you know, you're just taking. And then in terms of specialization, target projects that are going to help you showcase that you're actually a grown researcher in a specific niche, specifically seek mentorship, find ways to talk to people who came into research from different backgrounds, if that's going to help you learn how to talk about yourself better and to develop a niche that's helpful for you. And then even when AI is still something that you're not very clear about, trying to figure out ways of trying out different tools that your company is giving you access to, so that you are able to see how you can use it to make your work better, and then develop the skills that AI can do as well, so that you're able to be a good researcher. And focus on doing the research that matters to your stakeholders. Focus on doing research that matters always. I'm going to pass on to Eniola to close off and to lead the discussion after this.
Yay! Oh, yay. Thanks for joining, y'all. Huge shout out to all of the participants who shared their experiences and sat in and tested out this tool, and shared so freely. Like, people were very, very honest, and it was really helpful in pulling these insights together. Shout out to Robert and the Outset team for letting us use this tool and helping us to navigate the ins and outs of the tool. And then last but absolutely not least, thank you so much to Hilda, Mech, Jasmine, and Liz for all of your work on this project. This came together so well, and thank you for building out such impactful insights and findings from the bottom of my heart. This was amazing. It was so good to work with y'all, so thank you. Okay, so now I want to get into some conversation, right? I know we're a little bit over time, but I'm curious if anyone saw anything that surprised you. Did anything specifically resonate or not resonate in this research? Feel free to drop in the chat, or also the presentation is over. Feel free to come on camera and share. Did anything surprise you? If you're thinking about sharing something, go ahead and share it.
Be bold.
Okay, so I'll kick it to our team. So researchers who did the project, is there anything that specifically surprised y'all when you were listening to interviews and putting together the deck?
I'll say mine. And actually, whoever is iPad 2 asked this in a private chat, and so I shared my response in the chat. But this was also one of the things that was surprising to me. The question is, well, how can we use AI if, you know, we know that it's not exactly perfect, but we know that it's really helpful. So how can we actually use it? And one of the most prevalent responses I saw in the research from principal researchers as well as managers was use AI for really high level stuff. The stuff that will free human researchers up for all the really nitty gritty details. So as a really, really crude example, if you're researching, if your product is maybe a light socket or maybe the light socket instruction manual or something, again, very crude example, but you know, you're interviewing a bunch of people and only one person says, well, when I licked my finger and put it in the socket, I got electrocuted. Like, yeah, most people are not going to do that. That is an edge case for sure, but it's still really, really important to know. It's still a valuable insight. And so maybe AI wouldn't catch that, but a human researcher would. And so the human researcher can kind of focus on those really nitty gritty details that might be really important. I mean, obviously in a real case example, hopefully you have smarter people. But there's still things like that happen. And so allow AI to find all the other insights, the big insights that are, you know, most people or a lot of people or nobody, and then use the human kind of thing for the really nitty-gritty details. So I thought that was really helpful for me personally, because I was also a late adopter and kind of like, I'm not sure about this AI thing. But that actually was really encouraging. And I'm going to use it in the future.
Thanks, Liz. Awesome. Okay.
I think something that I noticed from the analysis is a lot of people, like, the job market's bad. I think that's just, I thought that was very validating. If you're out there and you're like looking for jobs and it's really hard, it's not because you are a horrible researcher. I think a lot of interviews that I analyzed, people have worked at Meta and they've been out of the job since the layoffs that are over a year ago. People have really great resumes and they are stuck in this job market, in the contractor loop, out of jobs, and like, and so it seems like it's still a really difficult space. But a lot of them were talking about how keeping their networks from all of these things that we share. So I'm not here to be like, oh, it's horrible, guys, but it's like, it's a difficult job market and people are still using all these strategies to still get interviews and to people are doing all these projects on the side. It's difficult, but people are making it work. And I think that is like, oh my God, we got this.
Amazing. All right, y'all. Anything else come to mind for folks that want to share? Going once?
I can share.
Yeah.
So maybe I'm like outing myself, but I was one of the participants. And yeah, no, thank you. I would say that like I admit like, well, because also I have done like design research projects, but I'm working in healthcare, so I don't know what you would call that, right? But I would say I did it also more out of curiosity because I was like, what would this look like? Because especially hearing how like difficult the job market is, I was like, okay, it's probably realistic. I ideally would love to get a job anywhere, right? Right. But like maybe a startup would be easier than a big company or a corporate, but then like what are resources like? So then I'm like, would I have to be paying for tools on my own? So I think too, like hearing you guys share this insight of like having a space to build community and to like try tools and talk about them, like that's huge because there are so many out there. And then, you know, I get like emails of, oh, we have these new features and here's a demo. And it's like, right, but like, what does that actually look like in practice and specific to research, not just like the product side? So I really appreciated you guys doing this, taking this project on and presenting us these findings because there are really great implications. And I think too is also great that you guys did target like across different levels of experience. So yeah, just thanks guys.
Thank you, Stacy. And thanks so much for participating. We appreciate you. Okay, y'all, I think this brings us to the end of this readout, but we will be sharing more. We'll share the high-level findings. It'll also be shared on Outset's site, so keep a lookout for that. And I can't wait to do this again. So thanks for joining, y'all. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you. Hi, thank
Yeah,
you.
bye-bye.
Bye.